Welcome into the January 4th edition of the Locked On Leafs podcast. I'm Mike DiStefano with Dave Morassutti. The Maple Leafs losing their first shootout of the year to the Blues last night, snapping Ilya Samsonov's at Scotiabank Arena. Austin Matthews did reach a milestone himself in the loss, however, and pretty big night tonight in the world of junior hockey, the World Championship semifinal between Canada and U.S. We'll tee that up for tonight, and if there's time, maybe dig into this Jakub Vrana situation in Detroit, because it's kind of a weird one with him getting placed on waivers. A big-time goal at a guy who we thought might be part of their future. Steve Yzerman thinks there could be a different future for this kid, but story a little bit later as well. All that and more coming up on today's edition of Locked On Leafs.
You're Locked On Maple Leafs, your daily podcast on the Toronto Maple Leafs. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Your one-stop shop for all things Leafs. I'm your TSN 1050 Toronto Radio, also known on TSN's Overdrive and on TSN 1050's Leafs Lunch. Joining me, it's my co-host Dave Morassutti from Sportsnet, also a writer for the Locked On Leafs podcast. It's a daily Maple Leaf-centric podcast, so be sure to subscribe for free. You can also now catch us up on video format on YouTube. Search up Locked On Leafs, hit subscribe, and get new content directly delivered to you each and every day, Monday through Leafs all the time. So a couple of things we got to get into today. There's a big matchup in the World Canada-US semifinal. That's always a treat to watch, and Connor Bedard's show hopefully continues, and he can really make a mark by doing what he's been doing against a marquee team like USA. So we'll chat about that a little bit. Talk about that Jakub Vrana situation with him being placed on waivers and officially clearing waivers. We just got word of that about an hour ago as of the recording of this podcast. So we'll kind of touch on that. But let's get into last night's game here, Dave. Maple Leafs falling to the St. Louis Blues in a shootout. 6-5 was the final. So we'll just open it up. Pretty open-ended question to start. Your thoughts, Dave?
Kind of a disappointing game for the Leafs, in my opinion. A Blues team, it's kind of predictable. A Blues team that's without two of their best forwards. So you eventually have Brendan Stott having a hero game for that team. But I hated the Leafs start. I didn't think they were way too. It was like chaotic in the defensive zone. Not a great start for Ilya Samsonov. It's just kind of a weird night. I guess the positive is they get a point out of it, but that was not a game. That's not what we've been seeing from the Leafs the last month, the way that they played in that St. Louis game. That's something that the older Leafs from early in the season were doing. They got to get, hopefully they got that game out of their system now.
Yeah, and ahead of the game, I heard Craig Berube kind of call out his players and Bill Armstrong call out his players or Doug Armstrong rather, and say two guys to step up here, Shen and Saad, and those are the two guys who kind of stepped up in that game for sure. The Maple Leafs, it's funny, I actually felt more Leafs more than ever in the first minutes of last night's game, Dave, because I slept through the minutes of the hockey game. Slept until about 7:30, 7:40, and then I look at my game started. Oh no, it's already 2-0. So we both slept through the first 40 minutes of that game, and then they didn't play well in overtime. At the third period, though, they locked it down pretty well, mounted the comeback, brought it into OT, and then ultimately lost the game in a shootout, obviously. Probably the two things that stick out about last night, I would say, is the play of the top line, which continues to be stellar, but maybe most notably was the continued poor play in goal from Ilya Samsonov. It's now 4 straight games where he's struggled coming off those really impressive back-to-back shutout performances. But since then, he's given up 4.25 goals against average in that 4-game span, an .850 save percentage in that 4-game span, was .844 last night, giving up 5 goals on 32 shots. And then if you want to add in the goals he gave up in the shootout as well, not an overly great night for Samsonov. I mean, are you starting to get concerned here that, his confidence is a little shook and it might take him a little bit to refine himself?
I think that's the big one there is when I'm watching that game last night, it's not like he's being beat like by the Blues. I think he's beating himself a little bit. Like the first goal, the Brandon Saad goal, it looked like a very innocent play, terrible angle to give up a goal, and you could see the body language. The body language right now is giving me a little bit of that Jack Campbell vibe, where you see he lets in a goal, he's going, he's shaking his head. It's scary, but that's the vibe I'm getting just because you see him shake his head. He gives up he gets beat clean. He's shaking his head. The one goal I felt like, okay, you can't really fault him for was the one. I think it was actually Shen's goal, the one where it was like all that commotion. Yeah, the commotion in front. Kerfoot gets gets hooked as he's trying to go and get the puck, and like that's a goal. I thought initially I thought he stopped it and he was going to freeze it, and then he lost it. But yeah, a lot of the ones where he just got beat clean, I'm just like,
well, the second goal too. I mean, that was just an unfortunate bounce.
Oh yeah, no way. Yeah, that was the other one where I was just like, anybody could have. No goalie has really stopped that unless you're just lucky enough to have
be in the right place, right time.
Yeah. So maybe 2 goals I felt like were a bit, but he still let another 3 goals and back-breaking goals too, right? Like the Leafs were getting momentum. Blues scored a goal. All right, we got to do this all over again. Good on the Leafs for not letting that 5-3. You're thinking, it's gonna be tough, but luckily Jordan Binnington was equally as bad on the other end. I mean, the Leafs scored some nice goals, but he was also not very good for St. Louis. So the good thing is that the Leafs kind of bailed out Samsonov as much as they could. But yeah, I'm starting to see, and you hear him talk about, but even before the break, like he's like, I kind of need a reset mentally. I don't know. Maybe they need to give Matt Murray a string of starts right now just to kind of give Samsonov that break. I don't know what the perfect recipe is here.
So that's interesting because I actually feel the opposite. I feel like Samsonov needs more starts because when he was in a groove and in rhythm, when Murray went down and he was playing every night, and he was like getting the bulk of the starts and he was, he got into a good groove. That's when he was at his best. And then since coming back from his injury, now that is in like a tandem split platoon situation, it seems like if he does have a struggling night or he allows one goal, now he might be getting in his own head being like, okay, I allow one goal. What does this mean going forward? Am I going to lose the next start? Am I going to be sitting on the pine? Like, I feel like maybe now he's thinking too much because he has a guy competing with him for starts. And maybe if he got a cup to get his game back, get him back into that rhythm and get his mindset back into the right place where it was earlier in the year, case scenario for him. But to your point, I mean, it could go either way. We don't know what is the right solution. If we did, we probably would be paid a lot more money than we are if we, were the goalie whisperers of the world. I'm sure the Toronto Maple Leafs would pay us greatly. The perfect plan here. But it just goes to show like there's two schools of thought and there's kind of 2 ways that things were. I guess they could also just kind of keep doing what they're doing. Give Samsonov, a start, 1 or 2 starts a week. Give Murray 1 or 2 starts a week. And just hopefully they can both play in a tandem and both have success. But right now, Samsonov's struggling, and I feel like waiting in between starts is, maybe that's affecting mindset. And perhaps maybe since he did play well in the third period and he had a pretty good overtime, I thought also had a great save in OT. Maybe you go back to him in the Seattle Kraken game tomorrow night just to get him another game to forget about the last one he just had.
Yeah, I mean, I think maybe, this is where the psychology of everything comes in, right? This is where Sheldon Keefe really needs to find out this is also where Curtis Sanford comes into play, right? He's going to tell Sheldon Keefe, like, look, I think he needs a game off, or I think we just need to keep feeding him a regular workload. That's what the goalie coach, that's another, like, other than the technical stuff, the goaltender coach is the one that's going to get a better sense of how the goaltender's feeling because they're working directly with them. So this is where Curtis Sanford earns his paycheck, considering he's getting paid more than to handle these things. So I do feel and part of me is also just like they got to get Samsonov going because we know that they don't want to be putting Matt Murray in a situation where he's playing too much. And so they really need to get this sorted out.
Well, they also don't want to be in a situation where Matt Murray gets injured, which he's been prone to. Has been prone to happening. And then you've got a Samsonov who's not playing at a whole lot of confidence, and then you got to throw him out there for a whole bunch of games. Hopefully, again, they can figure out a good balance that works for both goaltenders. It works best for the team. The other thing about last night, Matthews made history, becoming the fastest Maple Leaf to reach the 500-point mark. Got it off a secondary assist on William Nylander's goal last night. Did it in 50 games. Matt Sundin and Rick Vive did way back when they got their 500th points back in the day. So pretty news. Unfortunately, came in a losing effort. So it's good probably for him, but still an incredible feat. All right, Dave, let's take a quick break. When we get back, let's get to the good, the bad, the ugly in last night's game, and then we could also maybe I'll talk a little bit about this Jakub Vrana situation and tip Canada-US tonight, the semifinal. Winner going to the gold medal round, so we'll do that all on the other side. But first, the show sponsors, and that's betonline.net. It's your number one source for sports betting information, stats, news, and analysis. Get the latest odds and trends for every professional name. From pro football to college bowl season to basketball, the NHL, we've got it all at betonline.net. If you love sports, we're always the fastest and easiest way to get your betting info. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more. BetOnline, it's where the game's. Welcome back into the Locked On Leafs podcast. I'm Mike DiStefano. Got Dave Morassutti here with me. We are hosts here at the Locked On Leafs podcast, a daily Maple Leaf centric pod where if you are part of Leafs Nation and consider yourself a diehard fan, you got to be part of the Locked On Leafs family. We've set this New Year's goal, this resolution to get to 5,000 subscribers on YouTube by the end of 2023. We're at 2,400 and change, so we're almost halfway there. And we only started this channel back in February, so we're just hoping to basically stay on pace with what we did a year ago. Hopefully we can surpass it with, a lot of success that we can have. A long playoff could also help with that type of success, but it also takes y'all listening to help us get there as well. So if you're not subscribed and you enjoy the content that we provide you each and every day, we'd appreciate it if you would hit the little subscribe button and help us with that. Last night, Maple Leafs, a 6-5 shootout loss to the St. Louis Blues. It was the first shootout of the year for the team, and we saw some interesting decisions, I think, maybe to say the least. Were you surprised, I guess, when Rasmus Sandin was the fourth guy to come over the boards for Toronto?
I was watching the game with a friend of ours, our friend Austin. I'm just like,
shout out, friend of the show.
Shout out, friend of the show. And I'm just like, are they seriously putting Rasmus Sandin out right now? Like, before John Tavares? Is this what I'm really seeing right now? Now, I know a lot of Leaf media members were saying, well, Sandin has done very well in the shootout in practice. I get that. But you have John Tavares, who is also really good in the shootout. Maybe you let him go first. Then you put Rasmus Sandin third. But I will give Rasmus Sandin credit. It looked like he was going to score on that. Like, he was
a nice move. Like, that was a nice move. Unfortunately, the puck bobbled. I don't know if the ice, if it hit a stick perhaps, or if he collided with Binnington's stick. Something happened where the puck bobbled on him and he couldn't get a hold of it to put in the back of the net. But did make a nice move to your point. And yeah, I've spoken with a few media members about this before, and I was actually reminded, I want to say this was last year, so like long ago. Uh, he won a shootout competition for the Toronto Maple Leafs, and they just don't get in this situation very often.
Yeah.
So it was surprising at the time to hear about, hey, this guy actually in practice looks legit in a shootout. I guess it makes sense at the time. And Tavares, I think, is the one guy who you could argue, like, guys scored 47 goals in the NHL the one year. A lot of his goals, though, so does he have that breakaway? Does he have that shootout move? I don't know. We haven't been able to see that much at all. Did it a lot for this team back in the past. I think Kasha was given an opportunity a couple times last year, but there's just not many other options that they have once they get to the shootout. So it's a good thing they don't get there a lot, because there's not many. I mean, Michael Bunting was a name that a lot of people brought up because he had already had 2 goals in the game and he's been on fire of late, but he's not like a shootout type of guy, right? Like, he's similar to Tavares, and where he scored a lot of goals from in tight, off of plays and whatnot, as opposed to making a nice move. Not saying that he can't, but either way, I thought it was an interesting decision. It didn't work out, but I don't think that Keefe should be crucified for putting Sandin out. It was a nice move. It just didn't translate. The good, the bad, the ugly here, Dave. What did you like about last night's loss to the Blues? What are the good from last night?
Well, the top line, right? Nylander, Matthews, and Bunting. That line was just on flight. Like, every time they were on the ice, you felt like they were just gonna dominate and find a way to score. And I felt like they could have done even better last night. They were that good. Especially Matthews. That goal that he scored, like, I thought, oh crap, a bad pass. He's not gonna score. No, he's just gonna take it off the back heel and score on like the most awkward wrist shot. Like, no big deal. Like, that's just how good he is in those positions.
Yeah, it's a top line's been able to do. Like, that's clearly my good as well. Like, the way that they've been playing, all with multi-point nights. They outscored the Blues 3-0 while out there on the ice. They had, the shot 74 percentile, I believe, 68% expected goals last night as well. Went out there on the ice. So they were dominating both in the underlying number sheet, where, again, 3-0 in goals at 5-on-5 for that trio. And then Bunting also getting another. They've been great in the last 20 games. All 3 of those players have been a point per game or higher. So that trio has been real solid since getting put together. And of late, they really seem to be kicking into high gear. And last night again, like Matthews, it seemed like a night where he looked more like him last year's self in that game, where he was dominant, he was dancing, he was taking pucks, winning battles, shooting on net, and getting actual shots on goal. He just looked more dominant last night, and I think that top line clearly is really rolling right now. All right, what was bad about last night's game, Dave?
Bad? Well, I haven't minded the 5-4 power play unit. I just didn't like how they gave up the goal like that. Like, that's the danger of having the 5 forwards out on the power play. They're like, someone's got to defend. Out of all of them, Mitch Marner is likely the best option, and there's only so much he can do. So that shorthand goal kind of set the tone and gave the Blues kind of the momentum they needed to start the game. So I wasn't a fan of that. I know I was reading articles, saying the results have been encouraging for the 5-man forward power play, but I just don't know if this is something you were going to see long term, especially in the playoffs. I cannot see Sheldon Keefe rolling out 5 forwards on the power play unless it's a desperate situation.
Yeah, it's a real interesting scenario, because I like the look of it. It seemed like it's very fluid. Like, when you have a blue liner out there like Riley or Sandin, they're pretty well in their spot up at the top of the umbrella. and it seems as though when there's 5 guys out there, they're kind of moving all over the place, and it's interchangeable, and it seems like it's opened up more, and it's allowed more cross-ice stuff, which has opened up guys. It seems like there's 5 players out there who could score at any moment. It seems like they're less likely to force it to Matthews, which, you could argue you want that guy shooting the puck on the power play. But also it's opened up opportunities for Tavares to score a lot of power play goals, for Bunting, for Nylander, and even Mitch Marner's had a couple of power play goals here. So, I think that there's some things to really like about it, but also some things not to like. But this is what this regular season is for a team like this who expects to go to the playoffs. You try and, to experiment a little bit, assuming that it doesn't completely fall off the rails. And last night they did allow a goal, obviously, but special teams in general weren't great. That was my bad. Outscored 3-1, gave up 2 goals on the power play, and then gave up the shorty early in the game. So the special teams as a whole were kind of my bad from last night, but they've been all right, relatively all right as of late. But last night, not up to par. And speaking of the goal, a goal, that was my ugly. Like, that was just, you got to have that save. You got to make that stop. You can't go down 1-0, with a shorthanded goal on one that was, a squeaker like that. It's not great for anybody. And that was just an ugly one that, Samsonov wants back. And Sheldon Keefe post-game even said, like, got to have that one. That's the one that he would have wanted back.
Yeah, I definitely think that. Like, out of all the goals, that's probably the one where you just like if you get a save on that one, who knows how different the game looks, just because at least on the power play, maybe they can get a goal to start the game, right? They were all over. Like, also the Blues were kind of all over them to start the game too. They had the early lead in the shots and chances on net, so that was kind of like the ugliest goaltending for me too, just because that felt like a winnable game, just because the Blues were not that good themselves.
I think. Tell me if this is a stretch or not. Is that the first game of the year where goaltending cost them? Might be. The offense.
Yeah.
Like, there's been nights where the goaltending hasn't been the best, but the offense wasn't really there either. Where, last night you score 4 goals at home, that should be enough. 5 goals, sorry. You score 5 goals at home, that's got to be enough, and it just wasn't.
Yeah, I think it's fair to say that in overtime he saved their bacon. I'll give Samsonov credit on that, because I don't know what they were doing in overtime. Yeah. I even said in the Discord, like, just keep David Kampf out there, because nobody else was like wanting to play in overtime. Like, I won't get too far into that. It's kind of been the story all season for them. But I feel like that was a game where goaltending just, because like, even if they've had like bad goaltending, they're not giving up. Like, I think maybe the Washington game was the only other one I could say goaltending wasn't good enough. But in the Washington game, the Leafs only scored twice.
That's what I mean. It's like, this is the one night where it's like he got the offensive support necessary enough to win but still lose. That might be the first time all season, unless there's a night I'm thinking of that we could say that. But relatively, the goaltending hasn't been enough. Hitting a little bit of the slide here in these last 4 games. 2-1-1 record, so he's picking up some points, but still, you just want to see a little bit more, and for him to kind of rebound and get closer back to the form that he was playing in earlier in the season. All right, Dave, we'll take one more quick break. When we get back, let's tee up tonight's game. Canada-USA should be a terrific matchup. Winner moving on to play for the gold medal at the Worlds. And then a quick note on the Jakub Vrana situation, who cleared waivers today for the Detroit Red Wings. I'm Mike DiStefano with Dave Morassutti. You're listening to Locked On Leafs here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Welcome back into Locked On Leafs, your daily Maple Leafs podcast here. I'm Mike DiStefano with my co-host Dave Morassutti. Typically, we stick to Toronto, we stick to the Leafs. Sometimes when there's a big story, will go elsewhere. So there's kind of two big stories tonight around hockey. One of which is the Canada-U.S. Semifinal matchup, winner going on for the gold medal at the World Junior Championships. The other one is a situation going on in Detroit. Jakub Vrana, who was traded there a couple of years back, they gave up Anthony Mantha to get him. And he's been really productive in the time that he's played, which isn't a whole lot of games due to injuries and some off-ice situations. But through 29 games since he's been in Detroit, he has 22 goals, and he's really performed well at a goal per game average, second to since becoming a Detroit Red Wing across the entire NHL. That said, he was placed on waivers yesterday, just shortly after coming out of the player assistance program. He played a few games in the American League as on loan as a conditioning stint, and then instead of being activated and placed on the Red Wings roster, instead, yesterday Steve Yzerman put him on waivers, which was a bit of a shock and a big-time eyebrow raiser to myself and many across hockey. Obviously, if you followed around on Twitter, there was a lot of shocked and eyeballs going on at that. Are you surprised that he went unclaimed?
The only reason
why
I wasn't surprised, his salary, and I'm wondering if teams looked into maybe there's another issue we're not aware of with Vrana.
Well, there may not have been enough time to looked into that situation. You didn't roll the dice, but
when you're considering how much he's making, look, he's a very productive player. A lot of teams, I feel like, take a shot. You're not paying anything to get him.
That's what I mean.
What teams have the cap space really to do it? There are teams that have the cap space to do it. It's just I'm wondering if maybe there's a little bit of I wouldn't say overreading this the situation, but yeah, that was a head scratcher when you see him getting put on waivers, and then I just felt like Detroit was just going to take the chance that if somebody claims him, clearly something has not worked out there, something has fallen through. But yeah, it's a surprise for him putting on waivers. Him not being claimed wasn't as surprising, just because I know it's not always a given that someone's gonna go on and claim a guy with that much salary, even if he's a decent producer.
Making $5.25 million is his cap hit this year as well. So he's under contract, something that kind of scared some teams away. And I texted Chris Johnston to make sure that this was true, and Hockey Insider. And if a team has to have the full 5.25 cap or cap, or just the 2 and are remaining on his deal rest of season, and he said no, they have to have the full cap hit. So I proceeded to go to Cap Friendly to see if I could afford that, and unshockingly, a whole lot could actually afford that. Like 6 or 7 teams could afford and have that amount of space available to even accompany a move to bring in a Jakub Vrana onto their team. But what I thought maybe, and let's use the Coyote example, maybe, or the Anaheim Ducks. I mean, why not the Coyotes? Because that's a bit of a different situation. Or money-wise, they might not want to actually pay the physical cash to acquire this player. But why wouldn't a team just kind of want him, try and build back his trade value? I mean, I think he still has value. Like I said, it's a guy in his last 29 games has 22 goals. It's not like he's fallen off. He just threw, the assistance program and whatnot, and, he hasn't played since. But you give him those games to prove, that quality, successful player here at the NHL level, and then you retain salary. You've got a really intriguing trade chip here if you are willing to retain and pick up a draft pick by doing so. I'm surprised that the team didn't look into that.
Yeah, there's this a team like Anaheim. Like, what do you have to lose, right? To claim someone, and like I felt that's where I felt like just take a chance.
Worst case scenario, you have a 26-year-old guy who can score you 25 plus goals a season. Worst case scenario, well worth five and change that he's making, in my opinion.
Exactly. You looked at what Seattle did when they took Ilya Tolvanen.
Yeah,
like just take a chance on a younger guy who has upside. Right now, Tolvanen doesn't have the contract that Vrana does, but Vrana, as you said, has a track record. So that's where I was surprised in him not being claimed. But as you mentioned, there's so many limited teams. Maybe Anaheim felt like it just wasn't the right fit for them. But I mean, Anaheim's just going nowhere. So I don't know. I don't think they can really be too picky with with who's on the team. And like you look at what Arizona's done with taking all those players and all those contracts. Look at what Shane Gostisbehere like.
and now they're going to get an asset for him. At the deadline. Another assets for taking him and got him dirt cheap. Now they're going to get another asset for taking on that contract. And Montreal could be doing the exact same thing with Sean Monahan if he's healthy enough at the deadline. Like this happens sometimes where people's value get rebuilt. And I'm surprised that that one of the lesser teams didn't take the flyer on that to see if they could rebuild that value, retain half, and maybe get. I mean, if you're Toronto, let's say, and you could get Jakub Vrana, 26-year-old goal scorer, under contract for next season, if you could get a team to retain that at 50%, you're looking now at a contract of 2.7-ish, $2 and change million for this year and next. I mean, that's the exact type of player that Toronto needs in terms of adding that secondary score, that like the kind of player that maybe Toronto would want too. I mean, you'd give up a pretty penny for that, wouldn't you? Or wouldn't Dubas?
I mean, you wouldn't even have to. At this point, you wouldn't have to give up that big of a penny just because the guy was placed on waivers. Like the leverage that Detroit has now.
Well, but Toronto couldn't take him at full pop,
exactly.
Right? That's what I mean. Where a team who has the cap space to take him on at full pop can use that, weaponize their cap space, retain half, and then be like, okay, look, you're getting this 25 to 30 goal scorer for just a hair under $3 million or a hair over $2.5 million. That's now valued at a first-round pick, like a late first-round pick.
Well, that's very
true. $5 million, probably not, but at that, I think 100%.
Oh yeah, I mean, and that's probably. I mean, I'm sure the Leafs would have loved that opportunity. The problem also is the Detroit Red Wings. I mean, now it would have been great if, like, let's say Anaheim claimed him, and you could have done that with Anaheim. I just think sometimes GMs lack that creativity.
Sure.
Sometimes, like if we were GM, Mike, we definitely would have done that. We've also would have made a bunch of other dumb moves along the way, but it's that one move.
Well, it's at the end of the money, but I'm sure there are many GMs that are like, I'm not paying over $2.5 million for. That's ultimately how some of these guys think and operate. And I mean, whatever. I guess it's a business, and that's a lot of money to pay. But if it could help your team win championships, which brings in more money, might be worth it. Long-term goal, long-term investment. But what do we know? I've only won, the Stanley Cup championships in the NHL video game, but what do I know? Lastly, that's a joke for those who didn't get that, by the way. Lastly, Canada-US tonight, gold medal game semifinal. Give me a prediction before we head out.
Oh, this is going to be a close game, too. I mean, Slovakia-Canada was a close game. I'm going to go 4-3 Canada.
I think 4-2, Connor Bedard, 2 goals. I think Adam Fantilli hits the scoreboard tonight as well. I think he has a big game. Michigan University player. He's going to be playing against a couple of teammates on USA. Might want to show out and show up in front of those guys. And it's been a little slow to start the tournament. So I think tonight's the breakout game for Adam Fantilli. I think he gets on the score sheet, and Connor Bedard continues to make history here at the World Junior Championships. So those are our predictions. The games tonight, it's going to be a fun one. Hopefully Canada can roll through to the gold medal game, which will be on tomorrow, actually. Tomorrow. All right, Dave. That'll you got something to say?
No, I just said please don't lose to the U.S. because I remember the feeling a few years ago when Canada lost in the gold
Canada's
medal.
lost. Yeah, that was Zegras year.
Yeah.
Canada's lost, I believe the number is 5 of the last 6 or 4 of the last 5 games or 4 of the last 6, something like that to the Americans. But here I think is a little different. The talent disparity between Canada and US is greater than typical. So hopefully they can just play their game and come away with the victory. Talk about it on tomorrow's show, though. We'll also tee up the Kraken and Leafs game, which will be tomorrow as well. But that'll do it for us here today on the pod. I'd like to thank you for the show. You can subscribe to Locked On Leafs podcast on all podcast platforms and receive daily Leafs content. Follow myself on _Canuck. Follow Dave at D_Morassutti. Follow the show as well at Locked On Leafs. We'll be back with another episode for y'all tomorrow. But until then, keep it locked right here on Locked On Leafs.